Sikha we will be learning is in Chelik Chavtes. Look at the Sikhas Chelik Chavtes under the heading of Hoshana Rabba. It's about Hoshana Rabba. Von den Yonim of Hoshana Rabba is ausgeteilt von the andere Yemei Sukkos. Amongst the things that Hoshana Rabba, which is the last day of Sukkos, which is the day before Shmini Atzeres. So amongst the things which it's different than the other days of Sukkos is number one, Aleph, B'chol Yemei HaSukkos at Yomaket given the Mizbeach Blaze Eimol. During all the days of Sukkos, in the Beis HaMikdash, they went around the Mizbeach. But only once. But Hoshana Rabba Zibmol, Hoshana Rabba, they went around 7 times. They went around, there's a machlokes, whether they went around with the Arove, holding an Arove, or they went around with the Lulav. But they went around 7 times around the Mizbeach. Hoshana Rabba. Every other day of Sukkot, they went around once. Another thing, B'chol Yemei HaChag is Kifas HaRova B'tzidei HaMizbeach Given Norvens is Chal Bechet M'sheish Me'achel. There was a concept, the Rebbe will bring the details more in the Sikha later, that they would take an Arova and put it on the sides of the Mizbeach. That's called Skifas HaRova. They put the Arova up, and it was on top, the top of the Arova was bent towards the Mizbeach. But anyway, this idea of Skifas HaRova on the sides of the Mizbeach was only all the days of Sukkot, only if it was a weekday. Chal Yom Shabbos Liz B'teichachag, the Shabbos that came in middle of the Yontiv, middle of Sukkot, Ein Zekfin HaRova, they would not put the Arova up. Elim Ken Yom Shvi, Chol Yom Shvi Liz B'Shabbos. Only if the 7th day was Shabbos. Then Shabbos, then they would put it up on Shabbos also, in order to publicize Shehi Mitzvah, that it is a mitzvah. Because as the Rebbe brings in order 5, from the Ritva, that the Baisusim, the same group as the Tzdukim, they didn't believe in Torah Shabbal Peh, and they would say that since it's not written in the Torah, you should not put it up, and therefore they bedafke put it up. So if Shabbos, they didn't put it up. But if Hoshana Rabba came out Shabbos, the 7th day came out Shabbos, they would put it up even on Shabbos. Those salsi bisman hamikdash. This is all the time at the Beis Hamikdash. Bisman hazeh, but in our days when there's no Beis Hamikdash, ein neitel neisod the arove kol shiva semeach chag zeichen hamikdash. We don't take an arove all the 7 days of Sukkot. Ela b'yem hashvi bilvad. Only the 7th day, which is Hoshana Rabba, we take an arove. We know that we take an arove. This haste that means. Nowadays, we only do it if on the 7th day, and the last words that the Rebbe used, that you don't take it all the 7 days, even not as a Zeicher L'Mikdash, not even to remember how it was in the Beis Hamikdash, only on the 7th day they took it. That's the Loshen of the Rambam. And the Rebbe brings in this Order 6, that the Beis Yosef and the Lavush write, the reason why they made the 7th day B'dafke should be a Zeicher to the Mikdash of Arove, because even in this Beis HaMikdash, this day was connected to the Arove even more. Because as I said before, that in the Beis HaMikdash, they didn't take the Arove on Shabbos unless it was the 7th day. So we see that in the Beis HaMikdash, Shabbos, the 7th day, Hoshana Rabba had a special connection to the Arove that they didn't even on Shabbos. So when we make a Zeicher now, the Chachamim made a Zeicher that we take an Arove, but only on the 7th day, because that day, the inyan of the Arove is more important. Then the Rebbe says, another thing with which Hoshana Rabba is different after the Churban Beis Hamikdash, after the destruction of Beis Hamikdash. But Madaik, when in Kviyas HaChadoshim, as Hoshana Rabba is only 2 Sfal Shabbos, when they set up the Chadoshim, first they used to establish every month based on the witnesses who came and they testified they saw the new moon. So every month was different. They did not know ahead what, in other words, each month had the possibility to have 29 days or to have 30 days. And it would depend on the Eidos that would come. But they made sure that whatever way it was, that it shouldn't turn out that Hoshana Rabba is Shabbos. If they saw that the day of the Arove, which is Hoshana Rabba, would come out on Shabbos, so they would make that one of the months, since every month could be 29, 30, they would make sure that one of the months leading up should have 30 days, in order that Hoshana Rabba should be a day after Shabbos. And was only daf mevatel zayin until it was harova, and they shouldn't have to be mevatel to take the harova, because on Shabbos we don't take the Chacham said not to take the harova on Shabbos, even though the Beis Hamikdash did, but after Beis Hamikdash we don't, so we don't take it. So if it would come out that Hoshana Rabbah is Shabbos, they wouldn't be able to do this thing with the harova. So they made sure by adding a date to a certain one of the months leading up to Tishrei to make sure that Hoshana Rabbah does not kadam Shabbos. So we should not take away this mitzvah, this idea, this minig of having the harova and Hoshana Rabbah. We're stating Yerushalmi, it says in Yerushalmi, Leib mefkid lilun nemachashvan. Leib would command, would tell those that made the calculations. He said to them like this: Yavon daitchun, make your mind, put your mind to it. The leitavdin late kiyus of Shabbos le'arvus of Shabbos. When you set up the month, make sure it shouldn't come out that kiyus, which means Rosh Hashanah be Shabbos, because then we can't blow, or the harova should be Shabbos. But then he said, "V'in adach ketun." If you have to, if you have no choice, avdun kiyus. So doesn't matter if the kiyus, which means Rosh Hashanah, will be Shabbos, and we won't be able to blow, but late avdun arvus. But don't make that Hoshana Rabbah should be Shabbos, so we won't be able to do the harova. That for sure, you have to make sure that you should not have Hoshana Rabbah, which is the day we take the harova. It should not be a Shabbos, because then we won't be able to take it. Then the Rabbi continues. The same thing happened later when they stopped being Mekadosh al Pi, which means they stopped accepting witnesses who testified they saw the new moon, and every month they would decide whether it's 29 or 30. Then started when the Kvias HaChadoshim is al Pi HaCheshbon, started that they have a calculation, a original the Cheshbon, and they set up a calendar, 29 and 30 days, which month has what. They set it up. So they set up the calendar in such a way that Hoshana Rabbah could never come out on Shabbos. Well, the Kama days by the Rishonim, according to some opinions in the Rishonim, is those that Tama from Klalas Le Adu Rosh. This is the reason. This is one of the reasons why there is a rule that Rosh Hashanah cannot be, the first day Rosh Hashanah cannot be Adu, which means Aleph, Dalet, Vov, cannot be Aleph, which is Sunday, cannot be Dalet, which is Wednesday, and cannot be Vov, which is Friday. But Leib Rosh Hashanah, but Chalzan B'yem Aleph, if Rosh Hashanah would come out on Sunday, but the Hoshana Rabbah is found b'Shabbos, Hoshana Rabbah will come out on Shabbos. So in order for Hoshana Rabbah not to come on Shabbos, they made this rule, according to some opinions, that Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday, but the Sunday part of it is they didn't allow Rosh Hashanah to be Sunday, so then the Hoshana Rabbah would be Shabbos, and they didn't want that. Afal Pi has been Geya Shefer v'Lulav Leichashinen. Even though begin the Shefer and Lulav, which means the first day Rosh Hashanah and the first day of Sukkot, the Chachamim did not care. Afal Pi Sheim Rishon Deraisa. Even though the first day is a din b'deraisa that you have to blow Shefer and Rosh Hashanah, the first day of Sukkot is a deraisa, you have to bench esrig, take the Daled minim. Nevertheless, it could come out on a Shabbos, and b'meila we will not blow. So we see that for Hoshana Rabbah, for the harova, they made sure it should never come out on Shabbos, shouldn't be mevatel the mitzvah of harova. Even though for to be mevatel the mitzvah of Shefer, or to be mevatel the mitzvah of Sukkot, of esrig, of Daled minim, that the Chachamim didn't care. And according to the Cheshbainis, as we know, sometimes comes out that the first day of Rosh Hashanah is Shabbos, the first day of Sukkot is Shabbos, even though it means we won't know, we won't bench esrik and we won't blow Shefer. Frag Tosfos, Tosfos has Sakashe, wie kann man das sagen? How could you say this? As hayem harova shu zeicher lemikdash ba'al mechashinen. Concerning the day that you take the harova, which is only a zeicher to the ways in Beis Hamikdash, that we're afraid, we care, we don't want to destroy, we don't want it to be on Shabbos. In order, we should always be able to do the harova, and never be a time that you won't do this harova. When it comes to the Shefer and Sukkah and Minesrik, we didn't care. How's that? That's a deraisa. Well, if we cared about the harova, why didn't we care about this? And why is the harova stricter? When Tosfos answers, as Einoch Hanam, it's true. The Hanid Eksiv Behedye, because of this itself, because it's more deraisa, the Shefer and Sukkah and Esrik, that's why there they didn't care. Why? Because these which are written in the Torah, that people will not be mezalzel, will not be careless in other years. If we'll have a year that we do not do the harova, let's start the first one. If we will have a year that we do not blow Shefer or Esrik, doesn't mean that other years people will also not be careful with Shefer and Esrik. Because it's the Raisa. Everyone knows Shefer, you have to blow with the Raisa. So even though 1 year you will not blow because it's Shabbos, they won't, because of that, be careless in the other. Same thing with Nesrik. Aval Arove, the Rabbanon, but Arove is only the Rabbanon. Also, people might see 1 year we're not so careful with making the Arove, and since it's not such a big thing to begin with in their eyes, it's only a the Rabbanon, so maybe they will not do it other years also. So that's what the Chomim wanted to make sure, that there wouldn't be a year when we will not do the Arove. Like the Prisha writes in this expression, in order, because they were afraid that this mitzvah should not be forgotten because it's light in the eyes of people. Also, so the Chomim gave it more strength than the din of the Torah. So that's why, even though for Shofar and Esrik, we don't mind if it comes out on Shabbos, and we won't bench Esrik and don't blow Shofar, because it's a strong thing. People will not, because of that, be careless in other years. But Benegei Arova, we are afraid. Then the Rebbe says, all things in Torah are exact. He's moving from that, we understand that. Those gufa was nortzuli mitzvahs arove is ma'abar achedesh mitzvahs arove. This idea, this itself, that only because of the mitzvah of arove, they made the month extra. They gave an extra day to the month in order to fulfill arove. Is verstanden, from that we understand that die Mitzvah hat sich an Inje meyuchet mit welches es ausgeteilt von den anderen Mitzvahs. Must be that the Mitzvah of Arove and the Rabba is something special more than the other mitzvahs. And that's why Dafke, for this, they did all things to make sure that we do not miss the Mitzvah of Arove and Rabba. So what is so special about it? Wird man das verstehen, behagde Rabbi in dem Geder für Mitzvah Rabba Bechlal. First, let's explain. We understand it by first explaining what is this idea of the mitzvah arove. This is a separate mitzvah in the Beis Hamikdash. Besides the mitzvah of the lulav, which has an arove in it, also one of the 4 kinds. Besides that, there's a separate mitzvah of taking the arove and putting the arove there, and doing something with the arove. And he quotes the lashon from the Rambam. But the Rambam says, "Keitzad hoya mitzvah." How was the mitzvah of arove? What did they do with this arove? So he says like this: every day of the 7 days of Sukkot, they would bring big branches of arove. They would put it on the side of the mizbeach, on the sides. And the tip of it was pointing towards the mizbeach. At the time when they brought it and they put it up in the order, they would blow shofar, they would blow tkiya, through a tkiya, they would blow shofar. So there is a special mitzvah of arove, putting the arove on the side of the mizbeach. Now, this is a mitzvah that they did in the Beis Hamikdash, and the mitzvah is only in the Beis Hamikdash, not outside of the Beis Hamikdash. So the Rebbe says like this: Das was arove given a besondere mitzvah für sich, this that we said that the arove was a separate mitzvah. It was not part of the mitzvah of the Daled Minim, which had an arove. It's a separate mitzvah. But you can learn on 2 ways. Number one, you can learn that this is Nora Bazunder Pula, Bazunder Maisa mitzvah with arove. Could say like this: it's only a separate mitzvah, which means a separate act besides the arove of the lulav. Das heißt, it means the gather from arove is derselbe wie bei der arove shem lulav. The concept of arove is the same as the arove that we have in the lulav. Das ist do noch a mitzvah was wird getan mit der arove. Another mitzvah mit der arove, which means it's the same idea. In other words, saying the arove that they put in by the mizbeach is an extension of the mitzvah of arove. The Eibusha gave a mitzvah of arove, and in fact there are 2 mitzvahs in connection to this same arove. There's a mitzvah to take an arove and put it in your lulav or whatever amount of aroves, and there's a mitzvah to put aroves by the mizbeach. But the concept of it, the inyan of it, we say the gather of it is all one. There's one inyan of arove which has 2 mitzvahs to do with it. The second way is learned sinit nor abazun ma'isa mitzvah by them gavre in Beis Hamikdash. It's not only a separate act that a person would do in the Beis Hamikdash. Besides the act of the arove in the lulav, he would also have another mitzvah to do with it. This is a nander chefza shel arove. It's a different arove. They have no connection. They're 2 different. They both happen to be with an arove, but they're not like one is an extension or a connection to the other. What's the difference? One of the differences in halacha is like this. Late national from the Fuiskumen at the Shir Arove Shebamikdash is the Zelbe Shivit Arove Shebelulav. They come that if we're going to say, according to the first way, that there's all one thing with two acts that you have to do with the same arova. It doesn't mean to actually take out the same arova, which means with the same concept of arova, you have two acts. So it comes out that the shir of arova that you do in the mikdash, the size of the arova, the shir that it has, is the same shir as the arova shebelulav. Because they're both mitzvahs have the same concept of arova. So there is an inyan of arova. That's one with two mitzvahs to do with it. So the shir is the same. Oh, but like according to the second way, the chidush ba'arove shebamigdash is with us is ananda chefza shal arove, that the specialty of the arove that they did in the bismigdash is a different thing altogether. It had nothing to do with the arove of the lulav. It's a new thing altogether. It's a new chefza, a new object of arove. Is yashleimer as is do achilu b'neim in the shir ha'arove. You could say that there is a difference in what the shir is. Doesn't mean that the two mitzvahs have the same shir. They're not connected. Now, if we learn these two, based on the Schapiro of these two ways, that the difference will be whether it's the same shir or not, this will explain the machlek is the argument in Gemara wegen shir arova shebamikdash. What the shir of the arova in the Mikdash? There's one opinion that si darf haben gimel badei alin lachin. Is it that we have to have the lotion? There is 3 branches with leaves that are fresh, not dried out. Al derech with arova shebelulav, like the arova in the lulav has to have branches, and their branches have to have upon them fresh, not dried leaves. Or this is by or it's enough one branch, one arova with even one leaf on it. Now the truth is, the Rabbi says that, and this is a machlekes in Gemara. One opinion says, Reb Nachman says, Gimel badei alin lachin, 3 branches with leaves that are fresh, and the other opinion is that one branch, one stick with one leaf is enough. Now I want to say, it doesn't mean that it says here, the Rebbe said here that the opinion holds that it has to be 3 badei alin lachin is like the arov in the lulav. It doesn't mean the arov in the lulav is supposed to be 3. We know we don't have 3 arovas, we have 2 arovas. When Reb Nachman, who says this din, mentions 3, and the way the Rebbe brings Nor 18, the branches is 3 because for other reasons he says why we have to have 3. And he holds that you have to have 3, but Be'etzim it's not 3. The point here is not the amount. The point is here is that is a side point, whether it's 3 or not. The point is it has to be branch, maybe more than one branch, and has to be leaves on it, fresh leaves on it. That's one opinion. And that is the same as the lulav. The lulav has to have the branches, and it has to be with leaves on it, fresh leaves on it. So that's one opinion, that the arova that we do for the mizbeach has to be the same way as the same shir, same way as the arova of the lulav. The other opinion is no. The lulav taka has to have that. The arova that's on the side of the mizbeach could be one branch with one leaf on it. That's it. And the Rebbe says that this is connected. That if we hold that they're both the same inyan, the same chefze, the same concept, but with 2 mitzvahs, the shir is the same. That's the same arova that we're talking about. So that's the opinion that has the same way as the arova, the lulav. And the other opinion holds that the 2 separate things altogether, so it's not connected at all. They have 2 separate shurim. The Yisayrim is what the Rebbe says. I'll show you even more. The Rambam says, Haloch al meishe mesina shemevim b'migdash arova acheres chutz ma'arova shebelulav. The Haloch al meishe mesina, the Eibush told Moshe Rabbeinu in Har Sinai orally, he said to him like this. It's not written in the Torah at all, but we know we have to do it. The Eibush told Moshe Rabbeinu that in the Beis Hamikdash you have to bring another arova, except the arova of the lulav. And a person cannot be yetzer the mitzvah with the arova of the lulav. The shiura, the shir of the arova, that's the extra arova, not the one of the lulav, the one for the mizbeach, that in the Beis Hamikdash, the shir is afil alo echod the bat echod. Could be one leaf on one stick, on one branch there. So from the Loshna Rambam, by the Rambam writing arova acheres, he says like this. You have to bring another arova. So he calls it another. Chutz me arova shebelulav. And then he adds the words, except the arova of the lulav. Ve'ein odem yetzer, and he continues saying a person cannot be yetzer the mitzvah of arova by using the arova of the lulav. And l'chura, the Rebbe said in order 21, l'chura havel leimer b'kitzer. He should have said, halocha l'meishem mesinai shemivim b'mikdash arova acheres, and the mikdash bring another arova. Ve'ein odem yetzer dechavas arova shebelulav. You're not yetzer the mitzvah with just the arova of the lulav. Why does the Rambam add the words chutz me arova shebelulav? There's another one, except We know we're talking. We spoke about we know the lulav has to have an arova. He should have said that there's another halacha mishnah Sinai said that there's another arova that you have to have. Why did he have to add the words besides the arova of the lulav? His mashmeh from the head comes out. Adosinit blaze abazunder pula ma'isa gavre. That's not only there's another thing you have to do with it. Nor says another chefse shal arova. It's another type of arova. Und was der Fall, this is the reason, that's why you can't be Yetze with the Arove of the Lulav. Was from Pashas Aloshin is Lechura Mashma, from the simple Mashma, comes out, as nit Yetze, mis nit Yetze, afil when nem der Arove bifnei atzma, nit stam mit the Lulav. Now, you could learn Pshat and Rambam that he says, if you have the Arove in the Lulav and you're standing next to the Mizbeach, it's not good enough. Rabbi says, Mashma, not that. Even if you take it out of even if it's separate Arove, you take a separate arove. So that's what the Rambam says. I mean, you're not yetzer even if you take the arove separately, which means if you take the arove of the lulav and you take it separately, you're not yetzer the mitzvah of arove of the mizbeach. So the Rebbe said, "I'm not yetzer afilu v'nanem the arove b'fniat v'nitzah mit lulav." See, not only is if you stand with the lulav and you're doing the mitzvah of lulav, and you're also standing next to the mizbeach, so the arove will go for both. That's no good of other. But the smash, even if you take out the arove from the lulav and you use it, no, it has to be a different arove. And and also the Rambam says, "Shiura afilu ala echad uvad echad." The shir is one stick with one leaf. Like we said before. So from the Rambam we see how the two things fit together. The Rambam paskins that the shir is different because the shir by the arov in the lulav has to have some leaves, etc., and it's more than one. The shir of this one, the Rambam paskins, is only one stick with one leaf is a good enough, and that fits to what the Rambam seems to be saying, that it's a separate chefse. He says you have to have another arov besides the arov of the lulav. It means he makes it separately. In order 22, the Rebbe also adds that it's possible to say that another din is dependent on these two things. So, because it says in the Meiri, he says, he says another reason why you can't take out the arov of the lulav that you used, and you're going to use that by itself for the mizbeach. So the Rebbe says, so there's a svara whether it's like that or not. So it could be the Meiri is trying to tell us that this that you can't use is not just a side din. It depends. If it's a different chefs, a different concept of arove, then you could say, so the fact that you made this arove for the mitzvah of lulav, it's set aside for the mitzvah of lulav. So you can't take it from the lulav. If you say they're both the same thing, elamai, they're two separate mitzvahs, so it would be possible to say that you should be able to take out. That you can't do it together, but you could take it out from there, because the fact it was there and it was used for the mitzvah of the lulav doesn't take away from it being used, because they're basically the same thing. The Rebbe says, Adayin Tzorchin, it's not clear. But you could say such a svara too. The Rebbe says that the fact that you cannot, whether you could take it out, and the reason would be because it's already set aside for the mitzvah of lulav, will depend also on this. But the bottom line is, we see from here, from the Rambam, that the Rambam says that it seems to be saying that it's a separate entity. This whole, the two mitzvahs of arov and lulav is one thing, arov and the mizbeich is another thing, and therefore they have a different shir. Now the Rebbe says, al pizeh, now that we said that the difference, whether the argument, whether it has the same shir or not, depends on the two sides of the discussion, you come to, it comes out as lechitas Rambam steht in them the machlekes zwischen Abishol and Rabbonim. That all this is based, according to this, we'll say that this argument, whether you have to have the same shir or not, which is dependent on the svara, whether it's all one concept or two separate concepts, will be based on the argument, another argument between Abishol and the Rabbonim. And basically what he's saying, that the Abishol and Rabbonim argue not only in a certain way we learn, but they takemin to argue based on their way whether the shir is the same. What is the argument between Abishol and the Rabbonim? Abishol learned up Arova Shebemikdash when Arvei Nachal Ksiv Shtayim Achas Lulav Achas Hamikdash. The Abishol says that where do we know that you have to take an Arova in the Bis Hamikdash? Because when it talks about Arova of Lulav, it says Arvei Nachal. Arvei Nachal, the Arovas that grow by a stream, but it says Arvei Lo Sherabi plural, so it means two. there's two concepts. Two dinim has to do with an arove. One is for the lulav, one is for the mikdash. The Rabbana zog hilchas Schapiro lot. The Rabbana say no. It's not from this posting. It's halacha l'meishem esinai. Azevi esen etis v'nisach hamayim. The Gemara brings there other dinim that are halacha l'meishem esinai. For instance, esen etis. That's a separate din completely when you have 10 plants and the shaila, can you plow that area before Shemitah itself? So it's a din, whether you could or you can't. It's halacha l'meishem esinai. It's not written in the Torah at all. Or nisach hamayim, the fact that on Sukkot you have to pour water by the korban and by the mizbeach, that's halacha l'meishem esinai. So the Chachamim said the same thing as this also. The fact that you have to take an arava is completely not in the Torah. It is halacha l'meishem esinai. Again, Moshe Rabbeinu gave it over from the Eibishter. So we have a machlekes from where we know this din of arava in the Beis Hamikdash. So the Rebbe says like this: like Abba Shol, according to Abba Shol, v'bal the mitzvah arava is angesagt geworden und wird abgelernt von Posek Arba Nacha, was steht mefurish bei arava shebelulav. What Abba Shol is saying that we learn it out from the same word of arava that's written by the lulav. So according to him, what will come out is the cheftze from the arava shebemikdash, the zelba by the arava shebelulav. So obviously the arava in the mikdash is the same concept as the arava of the lulav. Comes from the same posik. So b'meila they're the same cheftze. Now we learn tarois, place tarois, asi abazun der mitzvah, or der akopon and pula barove. All we learn now that there's a separate mitzvah or a separate act in that rove. But basically it's the same idea. So the result will be according to the Rabbi Shol, since it's the same idea, so the share should be the same. But the Rabbana was halt na rove shev mikdash halacha l'meishem esinai. According to the Rabbana, hold that this is not learned out from that posuk. It's not in the Torah at all. It's halacha l'meishem esinai. Und in Yono, the chiyuva had dit gescheiches zum posuk arve nacha v'shtei by rove shebelulav, and the inyan of this arove in the mikdash has nothing to do with the arove of the lulav. Can or darf come, so it could come out, or maybe you should come out. The mitzvahs arove hat ech another get and another chefzik now. So according to the Rabbanon, it's like a separate thing. The mitzvah arove of the mikdash has nothing to do with the mitzvah arove of the lulav. They're two separate things, as we said before, and therefore, according to the Rabbanon, the taka would have two shiurim. The shir wouldn't be the same. And we see the Rambam taka seems to be saying that it's a separate chefze, and you taka paskans that the shir of the arove by the mikdash is a different shir. The beer pnimi in dem was mitzvah arove is a besonders sug chefze for the arove shebelulav. The deeper explanation, the more chassidish explanation of why the mitzvah arove is a separate category, a separate concept, a separate object than the arove that's in the lulav. That's a separate thing. In other words, and that's going to bring out what the Rebbe started in the beginning of the Sikha, that there's something special about this mitzvah arove in the mikdash. And now we're going to show that it's special not only about other things, even about the same arove. If you hold that the arove in the mikdash is a different chefze than the arove of the lulav, we'll see later that in Ruchnius it has a complete different meaning. And that's something special. That's why we'll see at the end, the Chachamim wanted not to skip it, and they made sure it shouldn't come out on Shabbos Hoshana Rabba, so we should never miss this concept of this arove of the mikdash that we do now as a zeichel mikdash. So the Rebbe explains it like this. The Negedem Teichen in Yonah Shel Arove Zok Kvedus Meir V'Chomi Admur. It says the Frierdiker Rebbe says in a Maimer in Tov Shiyud, he explains the Negedem the union of arove. So he says, as arove heim anoshim pshutim, arove represents simple Yidden, the key ma mitzvahs rag b'emunah pshuta, that they keep the mitzvahs with simple faith, simple emunah. Now, this seems to be different than what we always know. We always know the famous medrash that the Rebbe is going to quote in a moment, that the arove represents Yidden who do not learn Torah, not do mitzvahs. And here the Frierdiker Rebbe says that represents Anoshim Shutim, simple people, simple Yidden, who do the Emunah with the simplicity of their Emunah. So the Rebbe says like this, Yeshleima, we could say, as der mit bringt sich aruis an eimik and dibra medesh hayeduim. What the Frierdiker Rebbe said brings a deeper meaning in that famous medrash. The Dalit minim seine keneged, the Dalit sukim for Yidden, that these four kinds, four minim, are keneged, they're parallel to the four categories of Yidden. And the Rebbe quotes the medrash. Esrek zeh yesh betam v'yesh b'reach. Esrek has a taste and has a smell, which means they represent Yisrael Yidden sheyesh b'hem Torah v'yesh b'hem ma'asim tovim, that they have Torah and they have good deeds, mitzvahs. Kapes more when it says the lulav, which is the lulav made of the tree of the dates, yesh b'tam v'hem b'reich has a taste. The dates have a taste, but it doesn't have a smell. That represents Yisrael Yidden sheyesh b'hem Torah v'hem b'hem ma'asim tovim, that they have Torah but they don't have good deeds. Hodos sheyesh b'reich v'hem b'tam. The hodos, which has a smell, has no taste. Yisrael represents Yidden sheyesh b'hem ma'asim tovim v'hem b'hem Torah. They have good deeds, they have mitzvahs, and they don't have Torah. And Arove zu ein batam ve'ein bereach. Arove doesn't have not a taste and not a smell. That represents Yisrael Yidin she'ein behem lei Torah ve'lei ma'asim tevim. Doesn't have Torah, doesn't have ma'asim tevim. That's what the Medrash says. From Shitches Loshna Medrash come to is from the simple word meaning of the Medrash, of the words of the Medrash, it comes out. Adavke esrig is merames of dem sug Yidin was haben beid inyonim Torah ma'asim tevim. Only the esrig represents Yidin or Yid who has Torah and ma'asim tevim and good deeds. Vashenke by the other sugim felt in prat by the other categories is missing at least one, or missing Torah, which is the hodos represents the ones that do mitzvahs of missing Torah, or the kima mitzvahs, or the lulav, which is Torah missing mitzvahs, or the asfel and beidin yonim. The arova is missing both. So how does it fit to what the Friedrich Rebbe said? That the arova represents people who do Torah and mitzvahs, but very simple, without any depth in it, only Amunah Pshuta. So the Rebbe says that the Friedrich Rebbe's pshat is a deeper pshat in what the Medrash says. In them is Kvedushas Meir B'Chomet the Mun Mefarish. The Rebbe said, my father wrote the Rebbe explains this like this. The Azog Dorten, the Friedrich Rebbe says the Loshen Kol Yisrael Im Shovim B'Nikin Torah Mitzvahs. All the Yidden, there's a common denominator in all four types of Yidden. Even the Yidden that are represented by the Arove, they're all equal in keeping Torah and the mitzvahs. Das heißt, that means that the Friedrich Rebbe learns as by alle dalet zugim is dort kim from beiden yonim kim Torah mitzvahs. That by all categories, all four, we're talking the Yidden who are represented by all four have both things: keeping the Torah mitzvahs, limud yidiyas Torah kim mitzvah, learning, knowing Torah, and doing mitzvahs. And the Rebbe says, before he explains what the Friedrich Rebbe means, he says, Schapiro mukhrach. You have to say some pshat. Before he even explains what the Friedrich Rebbe said, he says that pshat, that all of them have Torah mitzvahs, you have to say. From where do we see it? That's mukhashaneh. Suk for lulav. Lulav, we said before, represents those that learn Torah and don't have mitzvahs. Because when you learn Torah the way you're supposed to, is eich makai mitzvah. The one that learns Torah for sure does the mitzvahs. Because learning brings it to do. So how could you say there's a group of people that only learn Torah and they don't do mitzvahs? Learning brings it to do mitzvahs. Und der was tut meistens Torah mitzvahs hocken dies Torah. And you can't say there's one category there that does only mitzvahs, doesn't learn. How could that be? Can't be doing mitzvahs without learning. So wissen mitzvahs, you have to learn in order to know how to do mitzvahs. So we understand that the lulav which represents Torah also has mitzvahs. The hadassim that represent mitzvahs also learn Torah. So from that we could come, if the other ones have both, the esek has certainly both. The lulav has both, and the hadassim have both. So we understand that Rav also has both. By the Eden from them sug is dokim Torah mitzvah b'peil. So also for sure the Arova that represents the lower level of people also actually learn Torah and do mitzvahs. So what does the Medrash mean that this represents Torah, this represents mitzvahs, this represents both, this represents none? The Pirish Apnim in Divrei Medrash is, according to what the Rebbe says, the inner pshat in the Medrash is the chilik b'shteit in them eifum ve'eichus v'zeyakim ater mitzvahs. Not whether they do Torah mitzvahs. It represents the quality of their doing Torah. They all do Torah mitzvah, but the quality. Torah is verbunden mit Meilas HaSeichel, u'maisim Torah mit Meilas HaMidas. Torah is connected to the Maila, the greatness of intellect. Maisim Tevim, good deeds, are connected to the specialty, the quality of midas, of the emotions. That's the difference between the four categories. Esek is beramas of the Eden, was in Zeir Kiyum Atei Mitzvahs, is dom Sai Mailas HaSeichel, Sai Mailas HaMidas. Esek represents the Eden, that when they do learn Torah and do mitzvahs, they invest in it, they have in it side the specialty of the intellect, which is represented by Torah, and side the concept of the midas. Lulav, Zayamarumas, in Lulav you've hinted the Eden was home beikim Mailas HaSeichel. The people, they do Torah mitzvahs both, but their most stress is on what Torah represents in Seichel. In Hodos, beikim Mailas HaMidas, in Hodos, which is mainly the Maila of Midas, doesn't mean that they only have Maisim Tevim, they don't do Torah. They do everything, but what do they stress? Something that's represented by what mitzvahs are, which are midas. When the Rabba is meramas of the Anoshim Pshutim v'Senzei Kiyum felt Sai Mailas Seichel Sai Mailas Amidus. The Rabba represents simple people that they don't have not the Maila of what Torah is represents, which is Seichel, intellect, and also not the Maila of Midas, which is represented by Maisim Tevim. When the Kiyum is nor mitabun Pshuta. They do Torah mitzvahs, but they don't have this specialty. They don't get involved in what Torah represents and what mitzvahs represent. They only do it with simple emunah, simple faith. It's for them gufa verstandi. From that we understand. Now that we said what this means and what arova means, so we understand as eichin suk arova is do amayla legabe the ante gimel minim. Till now, the way you learn pshat in the Medrash, simple pshat. Each one has a mile. Esek, lulav, hodas. Arova has no miles. That's all. Like has no miles. But now we're saying no. Arova does Torah mitzvahs. They do Torah mitzvahs in the Munah Pshuta. So they also have a mile which the other ones don't have. You do the word of Baal Shem Tov. We know the word of Baal Shem Tov. The pshitus from the Noshim Pshutim is eizach mit pshitus atzmas. That the simplicity of the simple Eden can do everything right, but they don't have seichel. They don't have midas. They do everything with the pshuta that reaches into the. He called it the pshitus atzmas, the simplicity of the essence of the Eibishter. And that's the mila that they have that the other ones don't have. And the Rebbe says, going to explain it soon and show it even more. The Irle Anal and the Sug Yidden from Arove, this that we said, the specialty of Yidden that are in the category of Arove, was Dafke and Zay Drik Sechu is the Inyan of Pshitas, that we said that Dafke by the Arove, we have this Inyan of simplicity, which is so deep and so great. Spiegelt sich up in the Arove Kepshuta. We see it in the actual Arove, the physical Arove. So you do, we know the beer at Amfar was the Bitzvah Lekachtam Lachem Bashteit, Dafke from Difi, meaning we know it says in Chassidus in different places, in Svarim, that the reason the Eibishter gave this mitzvah of Lekachtam Lachem with these four kinds, by the Zeis, Nikir, Venirgish, the Tchune von Achdis, in all four of these minim, you feel and you could explain, you see the concept of unity. How? Lulav is all of Kfusin, alle seine Blätter sind zusammengebunden bis Achdis. By Lulav, it says, Kapist Mora means that the leaves all have to be together. They have to be put together. If they open up, you can't use it. So this is Achdis, taking many things and you put it together. By Honest, we have the Achdis that you have to have in the same point coming out three leaves. That's called Mishulish. You have to have all three coming out. So you have the Achdis of all three. Arovas have another word in Aramaic. The Gemara says called Achvanan. They used to call it Achvanan. Why? Because they grow in a brotherhood. In other words, they grow very close to each other. They're all Ba'achdis. When Esrik is Dorbilon and Mishana Lashona, and Esrik could stay in the tree for a complete year. In Nimvan Financing the Alafir Shanu Yavim from the Dalat Kuvis Hashona, in the Esrik, you have a combination of all 4 seasons of the year, all changes of the air, of the atmosphere that's there in the year. Nochmer is Godel Mikulam, not only that, it grows because of it, which the real pshat is not that it stays on the tree for a whole year. Esrik doesn't stay on the tree. Nothing that we use doesn't stay on the tree for a whole year. What it really means is that other fruits, they have a certain time that they grow on the tree, and if they go beyond that time, it falls off. The rats, it falls off. Esrik could stay on the tree for a whole year, could go more. And not only that, it'll grow. So when we see the people at the biggest regim, it's not because there's a country that biggest regim grow. They just let it stay on the tree. And that's the threat. It could take all the seasons and it makes it grow bigger and bigger. So it's also an union of Achdus that it takes some many things, many seasons, and puts it together. Das was gewisse Sachen in Welt haben in sich der Minion Achdus. Now this concept that there's certain physical things in the world that represent the concept of unity. That even though naturally the way it should have been was that they should be separate, they shouldn't be Achdus, because the nature of the world is that things are separate. Hashem is Achdus, Hashem is unity. There's only one. Welt is Pirud, we call it, separation. And that's why it's connected. The Rebbe said, Meloshen Helem, the word Elam comes from the word Helem, means concealment of godliness. Godliness is Achdus. The things of the Welt is complete opposite. So most things are separate. The fact that we have certain things in the world represent Achdus, it is because spiritually in these physical things shines the simplicity of Hashem, which is the Achdus Apshuta, the simple unity of Hashem. So these 4 kinds have the simple unity. That's why they represent Achdus in this world. Und die Pschitte, Shalamayla, tutuf dem Yuchot Veskalus in jeder von den vier Minim. And the fact that there's this Pshittus, the Ardes Apshuto, the simple Ardes, that's there by the Eibusha, which shines. We don't see it, but that's why the Eibusha chose these meaning, because these are special types of things that have the Ardes that comes from the Pshittus of the Ardes of Hashem comes down in these three kinds. So the Eibusha made it come down. That even in an open, revealed way, the concept of Yeshes means ego and Mitzias. If you're a Yesh, you are separate from others. You make your Mitzias important. Now these things, because they have in them the Gilui of the Ardus of the Eibishter, so the Eibishter made that the fact that every Gashmistic thing has Yeshes should not be felt so much by them. You should also see their bittul was tutu was Ardus begilui. You see that they have Ardus, and Ardus comes from bittul. You wouldn't have Ardus if you're completely Yeshes. You have to have bittul. So these are things that have given in Hashemayim. Hashem puts in the union of Ardus into them, that begilui you see their Ardus. Aber, but the Rebbe says, Eichen de Tchunas Ardus from the Daled Minim Guf is et nachilik. But in the Ardus that we said before, all four of these kinds have Ardus, you see a difference. By the Gimel meaning, by the three kinds, Esrig, Lulav, and the Hodos, is the Ardus in Yedna Bifnei Atzmei. In each kind, there is Ardus in itself. In the Blätter from dem Lulav, or the Bada Hodos Atzman. The Ardus in the Lulav, you see this Lulav, in this one Lulav, you see all the leaves together. In this Hodos, you see that they all come out from the same point. Alin Kfusin, the leaves by the Lulav are together, plus a Bechat Kine by the Hodos. You have the three from one. Now, there Esrig was his Dor Bilona. The Esrig also, this Esrig, each Esrig has Agnes in it. It's able to take the differences of the seasons, but it's all within the same one that you're taking. We don't find by them the Agnes so much so that one esrig is b'agdus with another esrig, one lulav another lulav, one another lulav. Schenken arove by arove was by iris the isagdus in them was ein arove vax ba'achve v'agdus mit the other aroves. By aroves you see the agdus even more. That it's not an agdus in itself. The agdus of one arove with the other. Why is it agdus by arove? That they grow. A lot of them grow together. So here the agdus is even more than the other three. So there is something special we see in the Inyan of the Arove. And as we said before, the reason why these were chosen is because of the Gilui of the Ardus of Hashem. But Mela, the Ardus of these four kinds is the point why the Eibusha chose them. If that's the Maila, why the Eibusha chose them? Because they have Ardus. So this shows that the Arove has even a stronger Ardus. Just the Arove itself, because it has Ardus with things outside of itself, with other Aroves. While the Ardus Ba'arove is an Abreiter Nefmi by the other Draiminim, since the Ardus Ba'arove is a much wider way than the other three kinds, Bizas Eifen Hofchif and Teyavelam, it's an Ardus which is the opposite of the nature of the world, was is by Schalkus Apirits, which made him in Sveiten. The nature of the world, the things are separate, divided. And here it's not. This movement, Adosi der Farbos, in him is Meir, Begilu Yesa, the Pshita Shalmai, be under Gimel Minim. And why Taka does this have a greater Ardus? Because it must be, if the whole reason why there is Ardus in all these four kinds, because there's a Gilui of Ardus of the Eibishter, and this is more Ardus than the rest. There's a bigger Gilui of the Ardus of the Eibishter in the Arobes. And das is the time was Nafke by the Arove is the Ardus verbunden mit seinem Namen. And that's why only by the Arove we see the Yin of Ardus in the name. Nikro Achvana. We said the name in the Gemara, I guess in the Aramaic, or the name of the Arove is Achvana. Mashenke by the andere meaning by the other kinds, it's not in the name, because that's the mahus of the Arove, is that it has more gilui of the pshitus of the Eibishter, the Ardus of the Eibishter. The Shleimer, the Tamadove, was the Inyan Ardus is more begilui by Arove, is verbunden mit Minyan and Al-Gufe. And you could say the Rebbe says, why is that the Inyan of Ardus more begilui, more revealed by the Arove? It's connected to what this Inyan itself. What does that mean? By the andere Sugim Lulav Esig V'Hodos, Vibalda Yeder from Zehot and Zicha Milo, the Milas Protis for Seichel Amidas. By the other ones, they have the Maila of Ardus. We chose the Maila of Pshita, so fine. But in addition to that, each one has its own Maila. The Esrik, they have the Maila, or for Seichel Amidas. You have Yesh Tam, which is the Lulav. The Lulav has a Maila, the Maila of the Tam. Yesh Bereich by the Hodas is the Maila of the smell. Or the Yesh B'Shneim has both, which is the Esrik. So they have their own Mailas, besides the Mailas of their Ardus. Seinen die Mailas Gluyas, the Seichel Amidas, Mailim of the Pshita Shel Maila was his doing say. So the Mailas, the individual Mailas that each one has in addition to the Ardus, covers up on a little bit on the Ardis. In other words, as the Rabbi will explain in a moment, that normally we say, why were these minim chosen? Because they have Ardis. It's only by the Arove we see no other milas. So there the Ardis is the real reason. By the Esrog or the others, you never know. Maybe they talk have the mile of Ardis, which is Pshitas, but you'd never know. Maybe the other mile, maybe the Torah that they have, the Seichel that the Esrog has, or the Midas that the Lulav has, the Hodas has. The same Torah has both. Maybe that is. If the minyan Ardis Shebehem, so the milas cover up on the Ardis. You don't see the Ardis. So since it covers up on the Ardis, it covers up on the Pshitus that the Arova has, so it covers up on the Ardis. In Zay is made the Pshitus Lamaila. Why does the Ardis of the Arova? Because of the Pshitus. And since the Arova has no other milas, there's nothing to cover up on the Ardis, on the Pshitus. Mashenka by the other ones. It's impossible for someone to think that the reason they were chosen, those minim, is not because of the Ardis, not maybe because they're all milas, whether it's Tam or Reach. Mashenka the Besuga Arova, by the category of Arova was hotnit kemilas gluyas, ein betam vein bereach. The Arova has no official revealed milas. State that Inyan Ardis begili bepashas. There, the Inyan of Ardis is very obvious, very clear. Besides Ardis, there's no other reason why this is chosen as the mean. While the Pshitus Asmas is by your Meir Begilu in the Teva, now feeling the Nomen. Because the Ardis is there, the Pshitus is there. In the nature, it grows together with others, and even in the name. Just like we see the difference by Yidden. Because Afapi by Yidden is Faranachilek Kamal Mamish, no by Yidden have a Neshama. Neshama, every Yid has a Neshama, which is a part of Hashem Mamish. But it's verbunden with Pshitas Atzma, connected to the simplicity of the Atzma. They use the same lotion. The Eibishter himself, which is beyond any details, this is the Pshitas of the Eibishter. Zetten aber Rabbi Yidden is welches eine Reich and Seichel and Midas. You see, by those people, those Yidden who are rich in seichel, in intellect, and in emotions, say no, die milas gluyas, milim of the emunah pshuta. These special milas cover up on the emunah and the simplicity of their emunah. The pshitus with tmimus, Mr. Etzman and Shomer. The simplicity and the tmimus of the Etzman and Shomer. A person is a big bar seichel, he uses his seichel. So by him you don't see the emunah pshutus. A person who is a bal midas, has a lot of midas, Abbas Hashem, Yiras Hashem. You don't see the pshitas. Dafke by anoshim pshutim v'cholhom kemailas gluyas. Dafke by simple people that don't have special milas from seichel and midas. Ibazei the emunah begilui was a pshitas is cannot lezachem pshitas. By them, by the simple people, they have no other milas. What do you see in them? You see the pshitas, which is connected to pshitas of the Eibishter. Now, based on this, that we explained what's the mila of the arove that's in the lulav. Now let's go to the Arov of the Mikdash. Now we'll look deeper, see what is the Ma'ila of Arov of the Mikdash, even more than that. Why? The Arov Shebululav, Afapim, Zadatzmazai, and the Talking Ma'ilas Gluyas. But the Arov of the Lulav, even though on its own, it doesn't have any Ma'ilas, revealed Ma'ila, as we said. The far heart, Herzich in here, but yes, it says the Ma'ilas Ardus. That's why you could see more the quality of Ardus, that they grow together, you see the Ma'ila of Ardus. Von deswegen, wir bald müssen wir Chaber und Zaref zusammen mit den anderen drei Minim. But still, nevertheless, what do we do with it? We connect it to the other Minim. Wie sie werden ein Mitzvah, they turn into a Mitzvah. Der Fall ist der Ingen Abschito Shabo, was kommt und der Gilo durch Dafke, durch Cheder am Eilandskanal. So the simplicity that we find in the Arove, which comes because it doesn't have Milas. What happens? Nit betaros, it's not pure. It's not in its full purity. The pshitas, nevertheless, is covered by not its own milas, because it doesn't have milas. Covered because you put it together with the others, and they have milas, and they cover up. When you connect the arova to the esek and the lulav and the adasim, it covers up the pshitas. But in the arova was separately, had nothing to do with anything else. Has no connection to other things which are bali mile, have their own mile. Das is a mitzvah in welches is nitok in hella mitzad milas. It's such a mitzvah that doesn't have the concealment, the cover up of milas. Upshitus Atve steht near Begillah. And the Arava of the Migdash, the Pshitus is more Begillah than the Arava of the Lulav. Because there, nevertheless, it gets some of the covered by the Milas. And by the Arava and the Migdash, it's no Milas that it's covered. The Ashleimer Ados the Tamadei is the Rebbe says this could be the reason of those opinions, which is the Alocha, B'Shas Mizmakiv Sheva Pom in the Mizbeach B'Shana Rabba, that when they did surround the Mizbeach 7 times in the Shana Rabba is the Akofa blaze mit Lulav and Minov, that was only with the Lulav and its minim, or nit mit der Arava B'Samitzvah B'Fanatzmei. Not with the Arava, which is mitzvah B'Fanatzmei. Because by the Arava, it has to stay by itself. So the Arava that's in the Lulav is a separate mitzvah. So this is the reason for this opinion that you go around the Mizbeach with the Lulav, but not with the Rava. Rava is a mitzvah on its own, has nothing to do with the Lulav, has nothing to do with that's a separate mitzvah. When the father is a Rava, he tells us, that's what the Rambam says, that the Rava by the Bisamikdash was taken all by itself, and you couldn't be Yetzer, this mitzvah of Rava, by the Rava of the Lulav. Shir is not bedemt zum Shir ha'Rava the Lulav, and that's why the Shir of the Rava in the Migdash was not the same Shir lalocha as the Rava or the Lulav. Shleish alin lachen, you had to have 3 leaves at least, 3 fresh leaves, and it was not just not the same Shir of the Lulav. Not 3. I'm sorry, not 3 lalin. I feel here 1 was enough. With 1 leaf was enough. Not like the Aravish of the Lulav. It had to be 3 or more than 1, and it had to be leaves, etc., etc. But those badaitas is nit kanartos was it sufgish, nit gestellt from protim narachtat shuta. By doing that, and what was it? Not together with the others. And in itself, what was it? All you need is 1 stick, 1, and the Rebbe stresses the 1, and 1 leaf. It shows all achdas. There's nothing there, 1. There's nothing there but 1. And that's the Maile of the Arava of the Migdash. This explains another thing. The Sinyan Arava of the Migdash, as we said before, the Rabban and Holden, we pasken, is Aloch al Meshim Sinai. Und nit an Inyan Amafurish, nor viel nit an Inyan Anilmet von Apostel B'Teire Shebeksav. It's not written in the written Torah. It's not even hinted, and we learn it out from Apostle. See, Abba Shol Taka holds it's connected to the Pasuk of the Lulav, but we pasken that it's a separate mitzvah, and it's not learned out from the Pasuk of the Arvin Achal of the Lulav of the same Arava of the Lulav. It's a separate thing. Why? It's Halacha Mishim Sinai. Why? So the Rebbe explains, Al derech ha'movoi b'lukut Torah wegen dem chiluk zwischen Nisach HaMayim v'Shivas Yimei was Halacha Mishim Sinai. The Al Rebbe b'lukut Torah explains the difference between pouring the water in the 7 days of Sukkot, which is Halacha Mishim Sinai. The difference between that and Nisach HaYayim was mefurish b'Torah shebeksav b'hedya b'kamim b'kemes versus pouring the wine that we have in the Chumash many times written. So the Alter Rebbe explains what's the difference. So he says, as Nisuch HaMayim nemtzich v'nahecher ha'madreg v'nisach HaYayin. In Ruchni is the level of Nisuch HaMayim, pouring the water, comes from a higher level spiritually than the pouring of the wine. Because it's such a high level, it can't come down to be written in the Torah. Writing in the Torah is already etzir, it's a certain form, a certain limitation. Avad, it's a limitation of the Eibishter made and Torah, everything. But it represents that as great as it is, it's still not bligvul, not the real Ein Sof. But the yayin, the mayim, pouring the water is such a high madrege, that's why it's not written. It comes aloch and says, like it says there. The mile of the Arava Shebamigdash of the Arava Shebelulav. The same as the mile of the Arava of the Migdash, Arava of the Lulav. It's not written clearly commandment in written Torah, but the Snemtef and Azam Madrege was his Hecher from Kumali de Gili in Torah B'Ksav Etzir. Because such a Madrege that comes higher than being, comingly de Gili, being revealed in Torah that's written in a certain form. Was by Nefesh Odom, applying that to the way it's in the person, that's verbunden mit Azah Hecher and Madrege in the Neshama. It's connected to such a high level of the Neshama, was vereinzig mit dem Eibishter Pshitas, that's connected to the Eibishter. It's come the mitzvah, when you do this mitzvah, it's connected to the inner part of the neshama, the pshitus hanefesh, the simplicity of the nefesh was medar fayidin nit mitzvah zayin of them beferish break from nesis mefresh b'terish b'ksav. It's almost like saying the neshama has such a deep connection to it. Essentially, you don't even have to tell him to do it. It's not written. That's the concept, something that's less commandment because it's something that comes from the depths of the neshama, and that's why this Arava was only halacha mishim not written in Terish b'ksav, like the Alter Rebbe explains in the Geya why Nisuch HaMayim is not written in the Torah, and Nisach Hayayin is because that's a higher Madrega. If the analysis is moving based on what we said, we understand that the Rinya from Arava is Manazeh. So now the Arava nowadays that we do was Neitel Neison Norbeim Ashvi, we only do it on the 7th day in the Shana Rabba. Was it Bismanazeh Filo Nit Kaninya from Allah Al Mishim Sinai. Nowadays it's not even Allah Al Mishim Sinai. The Allah Al Mishim Sinai was only in the Beis. We are now doing Nor Minig Neviim. It's in the meaning of Neviim. And what does the meaning of Nevi'im? Befrat leid and Pirish B'Rishenim. Some Rishenim explain what does the meaning of a minig of Nevi'im. So normally we think minig Nevi'im means it's a minig that the Nevi'im instituted. It says no. A minig Nevi'im meant not as in Higu as home. A minig Shnogu came. Not that they instituted for the people. It's something that the Nevi'im did. And the people saw it. They did it. They copied the Nevi'im. So it's even less commandment. A meaning that they establish is also a din that you have to do. This is only a pure minig. Is dos gufa bavais. The fact that nowadays we don't even have a lochamesh mesina. It's purely a minig. This shows us bepnimius is nochecher b'mitzvah sarova shebebigdash is lochamesh mesina. That shows that deep down that's even deeper and higher madrege than the arova in the migdash. Because the arova in the migdash, as much as it's not written and it's a high madrege, it's still halacha mesh mesina. It's still told to do. But this is not even that. And that's even higher. Like in the same place in the Alter Rebbe the Torah writes, explains that the mile of hakofes on Shmini Atzeres and Chastera, even over the joy, the simcha of Hashavah, which is the pouring of the water. As is eine noch a hecher mailoson, which is higher even than pouring the water, which is at least a lochal mesham sinai. This is only a minig, it's even greater. Why? For the Rinya for minig Yisrael. The fact that this is a minig Yisrael means Yidden do it. Weiß that das ist verbunden mit dem Sheirish von Neshamas Yisrael. It shows it's connected to Yidden. It's connected to Yidden, was is kodvel l'teira, hecha von teira. We know that the Yidden are connected to the Eibishter, even two things especially connected to the Eibishter, Teira and Yidden. Yidden are even closer connected than the Teira. So there's something the Medrash says, Yidden's connection is closer to the Eibishter than Torah. So therefore, the things that Yidden do, which is correctly to do, is even higher than what it says in the Torah. Mitzadem was the Pshitas von Yidden is ein Sach mit Pshitas Atzmas. We're doing it. Why does a Yid do it? Why did Yidden do it? Weren't told to do it. Nevertheless, Yidden did it. That means it comes from the neshama itself, which is connected to the etzem of the Eibishter. Because the Yidden have that madrege, so they get in their anhoge something that has to do with a level higher than being written and higher than Nisir. That means higher even than haloch l'mishma sinai. Behind the bichachmaster etzeni is baras and is gal geworden teire mitzvah und ich shul divrei sofrim higher than the chochma of the Eibishter was put into the Ksav, or even what the Chachamim said, but a certain tzivoy, a certain seer, a certain form that it has that it's being given. They don't have any commandment, not in Teresh B'Ksav, not in Teresh B'Alpeh, not Halacha L'Meshim Sinai, and they just do it. That shows that that's connected to the essence of a Yid, the Pshitas of each neshama, the connected to the Pshitas of the Eibishter. Mitzadem was Yidden Firis Chazei, Mitzad Vos das is a Minig Yisrael, and because the Yidden do it, and now it is a Minig Yisrael, Vert Uvgeton Adosol Vern Teire. That makes it become Teire. Minig Yisrael, Vert Teire, who Minig Yisrael becomes Teire, Kemavuyir Makamacha, like I explained in different places. And the Rabbi in Order 57, he says this shows the connection, and this is a Shana Rabba, between the Shana Rabba and Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah. Shana Rabba is Eresh Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah, because the day of the Arova that we do is also a minig, and since it's a minig, it's connected to that high madrege, and similar to the akofes of Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah, which is connected to high madrege. So here we have two things which are so special: the Arova that we do and the akofes we do. They have a connection. That's why Shana Rabba comes right before Shmini Atzeres, which has this akofes. The Rebbe says, based on this, we can explain the pnimis apirish from them was Yom Arova falt into his b'Shabbos. The deeper pshat why the day of Arova will never come out on Shabbos. What's the reason for it? Is the time. The simple reason. The reason is that the reason that even nowadays we don't want the day of Arova Shana Rabba should be Shabbos because there's only bottle when the tilos Arova. Simple pshat is so we shouldn't be mevatel the taking the Arova. Is the far by the Rabbi, why take? So we said, we don't want to be mevatel the Rabbi. Why? Is the far by the Rabbi is grinker. We said in the beginning of the Sikha that a Rabbi, because it's so light, not so strict, not so important, But dafke for that, we don't want to be mavatalit. We're afraid people will be careless with it. Und der Fahrer hat man das gedacht, machazig sein, so they had to make it strong. Also, physical devreim yesem mishal Torah, they gave it more strength than Torah. That's why for a shofar they don't care if it comes out that we don't blow shofar because it's Shabbos, and Rabbi want because it's not so great, not so important. But Yeshleim, now we're saying as bepnimius is the time deeper. Chassidus the reason is till them is Rabbi is verbunden mit a hechere madrege. Why is Rabbi? We want never to skip it because it's such a high madrege. The high nevalin, the Arove was his meaning in the Nevi'im, since in the Arove was the meaning of the Nevi'im. Here you see the pshitos, the simplicity of the Eibishter himself, which is connected to the pshitos of Ayid, purely. Such a high madrege. The Rebbe does beif nam is alamo yeder yom ekayim mitzvah zarove beif and shov on kishinoi. Since it's such a high madrege, you can't make any changes. So every year we have to have it. We can't skip a year. So when the mitzvah of shofar, we could skip a year. If there's a reason for it, we skip a year. Because it's a high madrege, but nevertheless, we could skip it. But the arova to skip, which represents the pshitas of a yid, the pshitas connected to the pshitas of atzmas, that has to constantly be, no changes. And that itself is a chizuk. Bisa das spielt ins Mann von Welt, am besten Maber Chadoshim Chulu, that this is chizuk. We said that's a chizuk pushed by having it. He says the chizuk is to have it is a chizuk. That means this makes it that this physical fact that the time of the Chadoshim changed because of it, but the simple pshat is because this is a low madrege. But now we're saying it's such a high madrege that it always has to be, and because of that, they changed the time. What did they do? Bezna was Ma'abar Chadosh, Bezna added the day to the month. And we set up the setting of the calendars for all the years in such a way as it shouldn't affect the fact that we take an arova on the day of arova because it's such a high madrege, it always has to be. So bepashtas, it's the lowest, and that's connected to the fact it's the highest. And it turns out that they go together. It's the highest, b'meila it always has to be, and b'meila it affects the time, but they change the calendar all the years for this union of Netilas Arova.